In a world where fate often seems like a distant whisper, one man's journey proves that it can roar with the power to transform lives. Noah Sullivan, a 65-year-old billionaire, had spent decades grappling with the loss of his daughter Elena, who vanished in a hospital mix-up shortly after birth. Her disappearance left a void in his heart, a wound that refused to heal despite his wealth and success. But fate, it seems, had other plans. One ordinary day, Noah's path crossed with Emma Johnson, a homeless woman whose honesty and integrity would lead him to the discovery of a lifetime. Emma's decision to return Noah's lost wallet, a simple act of kindness, unlocked a door that had been shut for 40 years. Inside that wallet was not just cash, but a photo of a young girl with a distinctive birthmark, a birthmark identical to the one Emma herself had carried her entire life. This was no mere coincidence. It was a sign, a whisper of fate guiding them toward the truth. The wallet, once a symbol of loss, became the catalyst for a reunion that had been waiting decades to unfold. This is a story of how honesty and fate intertwine to heal old wounds and bridge the gaps between what was lost and what can be found. It's about the unbreakable bonds of family and the unexpected ways they can be restored. As Noah and Emma navigate the complexities of their newfound relationship, they discover that sometimes the most profound miracles are the ones that have been waiting in plain sight all along. Noah Sullivan, a 65-year-old billionaire with silver hair and eyes that had witnessed decades of cutthroat business deals, strode down the dusty streets of Sunnyside, a neighborhood known for its weather-beaten architecture and people barely so making ends meet. Dressed in an Armani suit that screamed out of place, his expression was that of a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms, not alleys. His mission? To seal $1 million deal with the city to transform the area into a luxury complex. A matter of hours, he thought, as a gust of wind carried the scent of cheap fast food. His phone rang. It was his lawyer, insisting on reviewing contracts. Noah snorted. "Why so dramatic? I know what I'm doing." Distracted, his fingers accidentally dropped his wallet into a crack in the pavement. He didn't notice. The wallet, a sleek leather case that had been with him for years, contained more than just money. It held memories, old family photos that he rarely looked at but couldn't bear to part with. There was a picture of his wife, taken on their wedding day, her smile radiant and full of promise. Another showed his daughter, Sarah, as a baby, her tiny hand grasping his finger. And then there was the birthmark, a small but distinctive feature on her neck that had always made her stand out. These photos, along with a substantial amount of cash, were now lying on the dirty pavement, waiting for someone to find them. Emma Johnson was sitting on a makeshift bench nearby, her eyes scanning the street for any sign of food or kindness. She had been homeless for 5 years, ever since a series of unfortunate events had led to her losing everything. At 42, she had learned to survive on the streets, but it was a tough existence. Her stomach growled, a constant reminder of her hunger as she watched the wealthy businessman walk by, oblivious to his loss. When she spotted the wallet on the ground, her heart raced. It was a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak day. She glanced around, making sure no one was watching, and then quickly picked up the wallet. For a moment, she considered keeping it. The cash could buy her week's worth of food, and the photos, well, they were just photos. But something inside her rebelled against the idea. Her adoptive mother, who had taken her in when she was just 10 years old, had instilled in her a strong sense of right and wrong. "Honesty is the best policy," she had always said. Emma sighed and opened the wallet, curious to see who it belonged to. Inside, among the cash and cards, she found the family photos. They told a story of love and happiness, a stark contrast to her own life. As she looked at the baby in one of the photos, she noticed the birthmark on its neck. It was identical to the one she had discovered on her own neck just the day before, after a stranger had pointed it out to her. The coincidence sent a shiver down her spine. Is this some kind of sign? She wondered aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. She knew she had to return the wallet, but now there was an added sense of urgency. Maybe, just maybe, this was the answer to a question she had been asking herself for years. Who am I really? Noah finished the call and moved on, oblivious to the small tragedy unfolding at his feet. Meanwhile, Emma grappled with the dilemma. The wallet could solve weeks of hunger, but her adoptive mother's words echoed in her mind. Honesty is the only inheritance no one can steal. With a sigh, Emma stood up, the blanket she had been sitting on slipping to the ground. Her legs felt wobbly, but she forced herself to move. The businessman was already walking away, his attention still on his phone. Emma quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. "Excuse me, sir," she called out, her voice shaky but determined. Noah turned around, surprise written on his face. He hadn't expected someone to approach him like this, especially not someone who looked like they had been sleeping on the streets. Noah's mind was elsewhere as he walked through Sunnyside, the neighborhood's dilapidated buildings and littered streets, a stark contrast to the luxury he was accustomed to. He was on the phone with his lawyer, discussing the finer points of the real estate deal that could potentially transform this area and make him a fortune. "I understand the risks," he said, his voice firm and confident, "but the potential return is too good to pass up." As he gestured with his free hand, emphasizing a point in the conversation, his wallet slipped from his pocket and fell to the ground. The sound was muffled by the noise of the bustling street, and he didn't notice it was gone. The wallet, a sleek leather case that had been with him for years, contained more than just money. It held memories, old family photos that he rarely looked at but couldn't bear to part with. There was a picture of his wife, taken on their wedding day, her smile radiant and full of promise. Another showed his daughter, Sarah, as a baby, her tiny hand grasping his finger. And then there was the birthmark, a small but distinctive feature on her neck that had always made her stand out. These photos, along with a substantial amount of cash, were now lying on the dirty pavement, waiting for someone to find them. Emma Johnson was sitting on a makeshift bench nearby, her eyes scanning the street for any sign of food or kindness. She had been homeless for 5 years, ever since a series of unfortunate events had led to her losing everything. At 42, she had learned to survive on the streets, but it was a tough existence. Her stomach growled, a constant reminder of her hunger as she watched the wealthy businessman walk by, oblivious to his loss. When she spotted the wallet on the ground, her heart raced. It was a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak day. She glanced around, making sure no one was watching, and then quickly picked up the wallet. For a moment, she considered keeping it. The cash could buy her week's worth of food, and the photos, well, they were just photos. But something inside her rebelled against the idea. Her adoptive mother, who had taken her in when she was just 10 years old, had instilled in her a strong sense of right and wrong. "Honesty is the best policy," she had always said. Emma sighed and opened the wallet, curious to see who it belonged to. Inside, among the cash and cards, she found the family photos. They told a story of love and happiness, a stark contrast to her own life. As she looked at the baby in one of the photos, she noticed the birthmark on its neck. It was identical to the one she had discovered on her own neck just the day before, after a stranger had pointed it out to her. The coincidence sent a shiver down her spine. Is this some kind of sign? She wondered aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. She knew she had to return the wallet, but now there was an added sense of urgency. Maybe, just maybe, this was the answer to a question she had been asking herself for years. Who am I really? Noah finished the call and moved on, oblivious to the small tragedy unfolding at his feet. Meanwhile, Emma grappled with the dilemma. The wallet could solve weeks of hunger, but her adoptive mother's words echoed in her mind. Honesty is the only inheritance no one can steal. With a sigh, Emma stood up, the blanket she had been sitting on slipping to the ground. Her legs felt wobbly, but she forced herself to move. The businessman was already walking away, his attention still on his phone. Emma quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. "Excuse me, sir," she called out, her voice shaky but determined. Noah turned around, surprise written on his face. He hadn't expected someone to approach him like this, especially not someone who looked like they had been sleeping on the streets. Emma clutched the wallet tightly in her hand, the leather cool against her skin. The temptation to keep it was overwhelming. She could use the money to buy food, to find a place, to stay, to start over. But as she looked at the family photos once again, she saw the love in their eyes, the bond that she had never experienced. It reminded her of the stories her adoptive mother used to tell her about her real parents, how they had tried to find her but never succeeded. "I can't break that bond for someone else," she said to herself, her resolve strengthening. She stood up, the blanket she had been sitting on slipping to the ground. Her legs felt wobbly, but she forced herself to move. The businessman was already walking away, his attention still on his phone. Emma quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. "Excuse me, sir," she called out, her voice shaky but determined. Noah turned around, surprise written on his face. He hadn't expected someone to approach him like this, especially not someone who looked like they had been sleeping on the streets. As Noah looked at the woman approaching him, he noticed the determination in her eyes. Her clothes were worn, and her hair was tangled, but there was a dignity about her that he couldn't ignore. "You dropped this," she said, holding out the wallet. Noah took it, his fingers brushing against hers. The touch sent a strange sensation through him, a feeling he couldn't quite place. "Thank you," he said, his voice softening. "I really appreciate it." Emma nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's the right thing to do," she replied, echoing the words her adoptive mother had taught her. Noah felt a knot form in his stomach as he noticed the birthmark on Emma's neck, the same one that his missing daughter had had. His breath hitched, and for a moment, he was speechless. "What's your name?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "Emma Johnson," she answered, her smile fading as she sensed his sudden change in demeanor. Noah couldn't help but admire her honesty and integrity. It was a rare quality in the world he lived in, where deals and money often took precedence over morality. "Thank you," he said again, this time with more sincerity. "I truly mean it." As they stood there, the bustling street around them fading into the background, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than just a random act of kindness. There was something deeper, something that connected them in a way he couldn't yet understand. And as Emma turned to walk away, Noah made a decision. He needed to know more about this woman who had returned his wallet and stirred up memories he had long tried to forget. Noah watched as Emma walked away, her figure blending into the crowd. There was something about her that he couldn't quite put his finger on, a sense of familiarity that went beyond the birthmark. It was in the way she carried herself, the gentle smile that played on her lips, the kindness in her eyes. It reminded him of Sarah, his daughter, who had been taken from him in a hospital mix-up 40 years ago. The pain of that loss had never truly healed, a wound that had festered over the years. He opened the wallet again, pulling out the family photos. The image of Sarah as a baby stared back at him, her birthmark a stark contrast against her soft skin. He compared it to the one on Emma's neck, trying to see if there was any difference. To him, they were identical. But how could that be? Emma was 42 years old, the same age Sarah would be if she were still alive. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Could it be possible? Could this homeless woman be his long-lost daughter? Noah's hands began to shake as he considered the implications. He needed to find out more, to uncover the truth that had been hidden for so many years. He turned and hurried after Emma, his determination growing with each step. "Wait!" he called out, his voice filled with urgency. Emma paused, looking back at him with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "Yes?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil she must have been feeling inside. Noah took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "I need to ask you something," he said, his words coming out more forcefully than he had intended. "Do you know anything about your birth family? About where you came from?" Emma's eyes widened, and for a moment, she was speechless. This was a question she had asked herself countless times, but she had never expected someone else to ask it of her. "No," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was told I was given up for adoption, but I never knew the details." "Why do you ask?" Noah hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "Because I think you might be my daughter," he said, the words feeling both right and surreal as they left his mouth. Emma's reaction was immediate. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "What?" she whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Noah could see the questions forming in her mind, the confusion and hope warring within her. He knew he had to proceed with caution, to handle this situation with the sensitivity it deserved. But he also knew that he couldn't turn back now. The truth was within reach, and he was determined to uncover it, no matter what it took. As Emma stood there, processing Noah's words, she felt a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her wanted to run, to flee from this stranger who was claiming to be her father, but another part of her was compelled to stay, to explore this possibility that had suddenly emerged. "How?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How could this be possible?" Noah took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "When you were born, there was a mix-up at the hospital," he explained, his voice steady despite the turmoil he was feeling inside. "They gave us the wrong baby, and our daughter, your birth name is Sarah, was taken from us. We searched for years, but we never found her." Emma's mind was racing. The birthmark, the resemblance, the way Noah had reacted to her. It all seemed to point to a connection she couldn't ignore. But it was so much to take in. "I need time," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Noah nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'll be here when you're ready." With that, Emma turned and walked away, her heart pounding, and her mind filled with questions. Noah stood there for a moment, watching her go. He knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives forever. And as he turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that fate had finally stepped in to correct a decades-old wrong. Noah stood there, the wallet in his hand, as he tried to process what he was seeing. The birthmark on Emma's neck was unmistakable. It was the same one that his daughter, Sarah, had had when she was a baby. The same one that had been in the photo he had just retrieved from the wallet. But how? Sarah had been lost to him for so many years, a painful chapter in his life that he had tried to move on from. And now, here was this woman, a stranger who had returned his wallet, with that very same birthmark. "Are you okay, sir?" Emma asked, her voice filled with concern. Noah shook his head, as if to clear his thoughts. "I'm fine," he said, though he didn't sound convincing, even to himself. "Why did you return the wallet?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Emma shrugged, her smile returning. "It just felt like the right thing to do," she said simply. Noah felt a pang of emotion. Her words were so familiar, so reminiscent of Sarah's gentle nature. He wanted to offer her something, anything, to show his gratitude. But Emma waved his offers away. "I don't need anything," she insisted. "Really, I just did what anyone should do." Noah couldn't help but admire her honesty and integrity. It was a rare quality in the world he lived in, where deals and money often took precedence over morality. "Thank you," he said again, this time with more sincerity. "I truly mean it." As they stood there, the bustling street around them fading into the background, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than just a random act of kindness. There was something deeper, something that connected them in a way he couldn't yet understand. And as Emma turned to walk away, Noah made a decision. He needed to know more about this woman who had returned his wallet and stirred up memories he had long tried to forget. Noah's mind raced as he watched Emma walk away. The birthmark, the resemblance, the way she carried herself, it all pointed to a connection that couldn't be ignored. But he also knew that jumping to conclusions could be dangerous. He needed to approach this situation with caution, to respect Emma's feelings and boundaries. Yet the pull to uncover the truth was too strong to ignore. He decided to take a chance. Pulling out his phone, he quickly jotted down Emma's name and the details of their encounter. He would need to look into her background to see if there was any possibility that she could be Sarah. It was a long shot, but it was a lead he couldn't afford to ignore. As he turned to leave, Noah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey to uncover the truth had just begun, and he was determined to see it through to the end. Noah's eyes locked onto Emma's neck, the small birthmark there standing out clearly against her skin. It was the same birthmark that had been on his daughter Sarah's neck, a distinctive feature that had made her recognizable even as a baby. The memory of Sarah's birth was still vivid in his mind. The joy, the excitement, the promise of a future filled with love. And then the hospital mix-up had happened. A tragic error that had taken his daughter from him and left a void that had never been filled. As he looked at Emma, he could see the resemblance in her eyes, the same gentle curve of her lips. It was as if Sarah had been looking back at him through Emma's face. But how could this be? The chances were astronomically slim, yet here they were, face to face, with this tiny but significant detail connecting them. Noah's heart raced as he considered the possibilities. Could Emma truly be his long-lost daughter? The idea was both exhilarating and terrifying. Emma, for her part, was trying to process what Noah had just said. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She had always wondered about her origins, had always felt like a piece of her identity was missing. And now this stranger, this wealthy businessman, was suggesting that she might be his daughter. It was a lot to take in. "How?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How could this be possible?" Noah took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "When you were born, there was a mix-up at the hospital," he explained, his voice steady despite the turmoil he was feeling inside. "They gave us the wrong baby, and our daughter, your birth name is Sarah, was taken from us. We searched for years, but we never found her." Emma's hand flew to her mouth as she xiaohua these words. It was like a puzzle that had finally started to make sense, pieces falling into place in a way she had never expected. The birthmark was just the beginning. There were other similarities, things that Noah had noticed but had been too afraid to acknowledge until now. The way Emma laughed, the tilt of her head when she was deep in thought, the kindness that radiated from her, even in her difficult circumstances. All of these reminded him of Sarah. And as he stood there, the truth beginning to dawn on him, Noah knew that he had to pursue this lead, no matter where it took him. The journey to uncover the truth had just begun, and he was determined to see it through to the end. As Emma processed Noah's words, she felt a strange mix of emotions. There was hope, a flicker of possibility that she might finally know where she came from. But there was also fear, the fear of getting her hopes up, only to be disappointed. "I need time," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Noah nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'll be here when you're ready." With that, Emma turned and walked away, her heart pounding, and her mind filled with questions. Noah stood there for a moment, watching her go. He knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives forever. And, As he turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that fate had finally stepped in to correct a decades-old wrong. Noah's mind was racing as he stood there, facing Emma. The possibility that she might be his long-lost daughter Sarah was both thrilling and terrifying. He had to know more, but he also didn't want to overwhelm her with his questions. Gently, he asked, "What's your name?" Emma looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "Emma Johnson," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil she must have been feeling inside. Noah felt a jolt of recognition at the name. It wasn't the name he had given his daughter, but it was a name that now held significance. "Emma," he repeated, savoring the sound of it. "That's a beautiful name." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Can I ask you some questions about your past? I promise I mean no harm." Emma hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I guess so," she said, her voice soft but firm. Noah began with simple questions, trying to build a picture of Emma's life and background. "Where did you grow up?" he asked. Emma told him about her childhood in various foster homes, moving from place to place as the system shuffled her along. There was no stability, no sense of belonging. "I never really had a family," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. Noah's heart ached at her words. It was the same pain he had felt when Sarah had been taken from him. He asked about her parents, but Emma had little to say. She had been told they had given her up for adoption, but she had never known the details. "I always wondered why they never came for me," she admitted, her eyes welling up with tears. Noah felt a surge of protectiveness. "I'm sure they had their reasons," he said gently, though his mind was racing with the possibility that those reasons might be connected to the hospital mix-up. As they talked, Noah noticed the similarities between Emma and Sarah growing stronger in his mind. It wasn't just the birthmark. It was the way she spoke, the expressions that crossed her face, the kindness that seemed to radiate from her. He knew he needed to tread carefully, to respect Emma's feelings and boundaries, but he also knew he couldn't let this opportunity slip away. The truth was within reach, and he was determined to uncover it, no matter what it took. Noah's curiosity deepened as Emma shared more about her life. She spoke of the foster families who had taken her in, some kinder than others, but none who had truly made her feel like she belonged. "I was always the outsider," she said with a wry smile. "The girl who didn't quite fit in." Noah's heart tightened. He had been an outsider too, in his own way, after losing Sarah. The pain of not belonging was something they shared, a bond that was beginning to form between them. He asked about her earliest memories, hoping to find any clue that might confirm his suspicions. Emma thought for a moment. "I remember a woman with red hair," she said. "She used to sing to me. I think she was my first foster mother. But I don't remember much else from before I was 5. Noah's mind raced. Could this woman with red hair be connected to the hospital mix-up? He made a mental note to look into it further. As their conversation continued, Noah found himself not only seeking answers but also genuinely enjoying Emma's company. She had a sharp wit and a dry sense of humor that reminded him of Sarah. "You know," she said at one point, "I never thought I'd be having a conversation like this with a billionaire." Noah laughed, the tension easing slightly. "I never thought I'd be talking to someone who could potentially change my life," he replied. It was a moment of connection, a flicker of hope amidst the uncertainty. Emma's voice wavered as she spoke of her childhood, a series of foster homes and temporary placements that had left her feeling rootless and disconnected. "I was passed from family to family," she said, her eyes distant as she recalled the memories. "No one ever seemed to want to keep me for long." Noah listened intently, his heart heavy with the knowledge of her pain. It was a pain he had experienced himself, the ache of not knowing where you belong. "I always wondered why my birth parents never came for me," Emma continued, her voice breaking slightly. "Did they not want me?" Did they forget about me? Noah's chest tightened at her words. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her that it wasn't her fault, that sometimes life took unexpected turns that had nothing to do with love or desire. But he also knew that his words alone wouldn't be enough to heal the wounds of a lifetime. Noah's mind was racing. If Emma was indeed his daughter Sarah, then her feelings of abandonment were misplaced. It wasn't that her birth parents didn't want her. It was that they had lost her through no fault of their own. The hospital mix-up had been a tragic error, one that had robbed both Emma and her birth family of the chance to build a life together. And now, after all these years, there was a chance to right that wrong. But before he could jump to conclusions, Noah knew he needed to gather more information. He asked Emma about her early years, about any memories she might have of her birth family, or the circumstances of her adoption. Emma shook her head. "I don't have any memories," she said. "I was too young when it happened. All I have are the stories from my foster parents and the few records they could find." Noah nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. He would need to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind Emma's origins. It wouldn't be easy, and there were no guarantees, but he was determined to try. For Emma's sake, and for his own, he needed to know the truth. And as he looked into her eyes, seeing the same longing and curiosity that had driven him for decades, he knew that he wouldn't rest until he found the answers they both deserved. As Emma finished her story, she noticed the look of determination in Noah's eyes. It was a look she had seen before in the faces of people who had made up their minds about something. "You're going to look into this, aren't you?" she asked, her voice tinged with both fear and hope. Noah nodded slowly. "I need to know the truth," he said, "and I think you do too." Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever might come next. "Okay," she said, "let's find out the truth together." With that, they parted ways, but not before exchanging phone numbers. Noah knew that the next step would involve discreet inquiries and possibly hiring a private investigator. It was a path that could lead to heartbreak or healing, and as he walked away, he couldn't help but feel that fate had brought them together for a reason. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit, and he was determined to see the picture through to its completion. Noah's mind was made up as he walked away from Emma that day. The similarities were too striking to ignore, and the possibility that she might be his long-lost daughter, Sarah, was a spark that had ignited a fire within him. He needed answers, and he needed them quickly. Pulling out his phone, he dialed the number of a private investigator he had used in the past, a discreet and thorough professional who had helped him with sensitive matters before. "James," Noah said when the investigator answered, "I need your help with something urgent." He proceeded to explain the situation, describing Emma and the striking birthmark on her neck. He mentioned the hospital mix-up from 40 years ago and the possibility that Emma might be his daughter. James listened intently, his sharp mind already piecing together the potential avenues for investigation. "I'll need access to hospital records from that time," James said, his voice professional and focused. "And any adoption records that might be available. It won't be easy, but I believe we can uncover the truth." Noah nodded, even though James couldn't see him. "Do whatever it takes," he said, "and keep this between us. I don't want to get Emma's hopes up until we have concrete evidence." As Noah hung up the phone, he felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. This was a gamble, and there was a chance that the investigation would lead to nothing. But he couldn't ignore the possibility that Emma was his daughter. The birthmark, the resemblance, the way she had returned his wallet with such honesty, it all pointed to a connection that couldn't be ignored. Noah knew that the process might take time, and he didn't want to rush Emma or overwhelm her with his questions. So he decided to wait, to let the investigation run its course while he continued to build a relationship with Emma. Each conversation they had deepened the bond between them, and Noah found himself looking forward to their meetings with anticipation. But as the days passed and the investigation progressed, Noah's patience was tested. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. The waiting was torture, each day bringing both hope and fear. What if the investigation proved that Emma wasn't his daughter? What then? Noah pushed the thoughts aside. He would deal with that bridge when he came to it. For now, he focused on the possibility of reconnecting with Sarah, of finally healing the wound that had festered for so long. Noah's mind was a whirlwind of emotions as he waited for James to call. He spent his days going through the motions of his business, attending meetings and signing contracts. But his thoughts were always with Emma. He would find himself staring at her photo, the one she had given him during their conversation, tracing the birthmark on her neck with his finger. It was the same as Sarah's. He was certain of it. He also found himself thinking about the life Emma had led, the foster homes, the uncertainty, the pain of not knowing where she belonged. It was a life that Noah had failed to protect her from. And now, he was determined to make amends. He had already spoken to his lawyer about setting up a trust fund for Emma, a way to provide for her without overwhelming her with sudden wealth. It was a small gesture, but it was a start. As the days turned into weeks, Noah's anticipation grew. James had promised to call as soon as he had any information, and Noah was ready to act the moment he did. He had even started planning a trip to the hospital where Emma had been born, wanting to see for himself the place where their lives had diverged so many years ago. It was a journey into the past, one that Noah hoped would lead to a brighter future. The call from James came late one evening, interrupting the quiet of Noah's study. His heart raced as he answered, sensing that this moment would change everything. "Noah," James said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We found it." The hospital records from 40 years ago, there was a mix-up in the nursery. 2 babies were switched accidentally. Noah's breath hitched. "And Emma?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emma Johnson," James confirmed, "is indeed your biological daughter. The birthmark on her neck matches the description in your daughter Sarah's medical records. It's her." Noah felt a wave of emotions crash over him. Relief, joy, disbelief. It was the moment he had hoped for but never truly believed would come. The years of searching, the pain of loss, the unanswered questions, it all culminated in this revelation. Sarah, his Sarah, was alive, and she was Emma. The news was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Noah knew he had to proceed with caution. Emma's life had been turned upside down already, and he didn't want to overwhelm her with this truth without preparation. But the urge to run to her, to embrace her, to tell her everything, was almost overpowering. He spent the rest of the evening poring over the investigation files, confirming every detail. The hospital mix-up had been a tragic error, a moment of negligence that had altered the lives of 2 families forever. Sarah had been given to another family, while the Sullivans had raised a different child. It was a heart-wrenching mistake, but now, after 4 decades, there was a chance to correct it. Noah knew that the next step was to share this truth with Emma, but he also knew it had to be done with sensitivity and care. This was a life-changing revelation, and Emma deserved to hear it from him directly. As he planned how to approach her, Noah felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was finally on the path to reuniting with his daughter, and nothing was going to stand in his way. Noah's hands trembled as he held the hospital records, the DNA test results, and the old photos. These documents weren't just pieces of paper. They were the key to Emma's identity, to the truth that had been hidden for so long. He knew he had to share them with her, but he also knew it had to be done in the right way. He decided to meet her at the park, where they had first spoken, a place that now held a new significance for both of them. As he waited, the evening light casting long shadows around him, Noah rehearsed what he would say. He wanted to be honest, to be clear, but also to give Emma the space to process the information at her own pace. When she arrived, her steps hesitant, but determined, Noah felt a surge of hope. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment that would change everything. Noah paced his study, the investigation files spread out on his desk as he grappled with the weight of the revelation. Emma was his daughter, Sarah. The truth was right there in black and white, but accepting it was another matter altogether. Guilt gnawed at him. How could he have let so many years pass without ever finding her? He had searched, yes, but not hard enough. Not with the relentless determination that a father should have. And now, here she was, a woman who had faced so much hardship, and he was only just discovering her existence. He thought about the life she had lived, the foster homes, the uncertainty, the pain of not knowing where she belonged. It was a life he had failed to protect her from, a life that could have been different if the hospital mix-up had never happened. Noah's chest tightened with the weight of this realization. He had a chance to make amends, to be the father she deserved. But he also knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. The fear of rejection was there too. What if Emma didn't want to be a part of his life? What if the pain of her past was too great to overcome? Noah took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He had to be honest with her, to share the truth, and let her decide what came next. It was the least he could do after so many years of silence. As he prepared to meet Emma, Noah rehearsed what he would say, trying to find the right words to convey the depth of his feelings and the importance of this revelation. He knew that whatever happened next, his life had changed forever, and he was ready to face whatever came, as long as it meant having a chance to connect with his daughter. Noah's reflection in the mirror showed a man weathered by time and regret, but there was a spark of hope in his eyes that hadn't been there in decades. He smoothed his tie, adjusted his cufflinks, and took one last deep breath before leaving the study. The time had come to face the truth, to bridge the gap of 40 years, and to see where this new chapter of their lives would lead. As he stepped outside into the cool evening air, Noah felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. This was his moment, his chance to right a wrong that had haunted him for decades. And as he walked toward the park where he was to meet Emma, he couldn't help but feel that fate had finally aligned in their favor. The truth was within reach, and he was determined to share it, no matter the cost. The next morning, Noah found Emma at her usual spot by the park, her blanket spread out on the ground as she watched the world go by. His heart raced as he approached her, the weight of the truth pressing heavily on his shoulders. "Emma," he said gently, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, her eyes meeting his with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "We need to talk," Noah said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Emma could sense the gravity of the moment. She motioned for him to sit beside her, her posture tense as she waited for him to speak. Noah took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I know this might be hard to hear," he began, "but I've discovered something about your past. Something that changes everything." Emma's eyes widened, her breath hitching as she braced herself for whatever he was about to say. Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out the hospital records, the DNA test results, and the old photos. He handed them to Emma one by one, each document revealing another piece of the puzzle. "The birthmark on your neck," he explained, his voice breaking slightly. "It's the same one your birth mother and I noticed when you were born, and the DNA test confirms it. You're my daughter. Your name was Sarah, but due to a hospital mix-up, you were given to another family. They named you Emma." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as the reality of his words began to sink in. She looked at the photos, images of Noah and his family, the baby who was her, the life she might have had. It was overwhelming, the flood of emotions threatening to consume her. "Why didn't you find me before?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of pain and hope. Noah's heart ached at her question. "I tried," he said honestly. "I searched for years, but after the initial leads dried up, I lost. Hope. I never stopped thinking about you, though. Every day I wondered where you were and if you were okay. He reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly before resting gently on hers. I'm so sorry for the pain you've been through. I wish I could go back and change everything, but I can't. All I can do is be here for you now, if you'll let me. Emma's tears fell freely now, a mixture of sorrow for the lost years and joy at the discovery of her true identity. She looked at Noah, really looked at him, and saw the resemblance, the same eyes, the same smile. It was surreal, this moment that she had dreamed of and feared in equal measure. I need time, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I need time to process this. Noah nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need, he said. I'm not going anywhere. And with that, they sat in silence, the weight of their shared history hanging between them, as the first steps toward healing began. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the park, Noah and Emma remained seated, the documents spread out between them. Emma had cried herself dry, and now a sense of weary acceptance had settled over her. What happens now? She asked, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. Noah took her hand in his touch warm and reassuring. Now, he said, we start building a future together, a future that should have begun 40 years ago. Emma looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of insincerity. What she found there was a mixture of determination and vulnerability. A man who had been given a second chance and was determined not to waste it. I'm scared, she admitted softly. Noah smiled gently. So am I, he said. But we don't have to do this alone. We have each other now. With that, Emma leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder as the tears began to flow again. Tears of joy this time, tears of hope. It was a moment of connection, a fragile but real bond forming between them, and as they sat there, the world around them fading into the background, Noah knew that this was just the beginning of a journey toward healing and redemption. The hospital's records room was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and dust. Noah and Emma stood side by side, their fingers brushing as they leaned over the file that held the truth of their past. The documents were yellowed with age, the handwriting faded but still legible. Emma's birth certificate was there, along with the records of the mix-up, the notes that had been hastily written in the chaos of that night 40 years ago. Noah pointed to a specific entry, his voice steady as he explained. See here? 2 babies were brought into the nursery at nearly the same time. The staff was short-handed, and in the confusion, they mixed up the identification tags. By the time the mistake was discovered, the families had already left the hospital. Emma's eyes widened as she read the words, the finality of it all sinking in. This was proof, irrefutable evidence, that she was indeed Noah's daughter. The nurse who had been on duty that night was long retired, but her testimony was still on file. She had spoken of the mix-up with regret, the mistake that had haunted her for years. She always wondered what became of those babies, Noah said softly, his arm finding its way around Emma's shoulders. And now we know. Emma's emotions were a turbulent sea. Anger at the carelessness that had torn her from her birth family, sorrow for the life she might have had, and gratitude that she had finally found the truth. What happens now? She asked, her voice filled with a mix of fear and hope. Noah squeezed her shoulder gently. Now, he said, we start building a future together. A future that should have begun 40 years ago. They stood there for a moment longer, the weight of their discovery pressing down on them, before Emma took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Let's go home, she said, her voice stronger now. And with that, they left the hospital, ready to face whatever came next. As they walked out of the hospital, Emma felt a strange mix of emotions. There was joy at finally knowing the truth, but also a sense of loss for the years that had been stolen from them. Noah sensed her turmoil and stayed close, offering silent support. They didn't speak much on the drive back to his home, each lost in their own thoughts, but the comfortable silence between them spoke volumes. When they arrived at Noah's mansion, Emma stepped out of the car and looked up at the grand building. It was imposing, but somehow it felt different now. It wasn't just a house. It was a place where she might finally belong. Noah followed her gaze. "It's been empty for a long time," he said quietly. "But maybe now it can be a home." Emma smiled through her tears. "Maybe," she whispered. And with that, they walked inside, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives together. Noah's mansion was filled with the warm glow of sunset as he led Emma through the familiar halls. The house was large, with high ceilings and expansive rooms, but it had always felt empty to Noah without Sarah. Now, as he prepared to introduce Emma to her siblings, he could feel the tension in the air. This was a moment that would change all their lives forever. His other children, Michael, 38, a successful lawyer with a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor; Laura, 35, a compassionate nurse with a heart of gold; and young David, 28, an aspiring artist with a free spirit, were gathered in the living room, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Noah cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "There's someone I need you to meet," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Emma stood just behind him, her hands nervously twisting the strap of her bag. As Noah turned to introduce her, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever came next. "Everyone," Noah began, "this is Emma, your sister." The room fell silent. The siblings exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. Michael was the first to speak. "Sister?" he repeated, his voice tinged with skepticism. "What do you mean, sister?" Noah explained the hospital mix-up, the years of searching, and the recent discovery. As he spoke, Emma watched her siblings' reactions, her heart pounding in her chest. Laura was the first to move, her eyes filling with tears as she approached Emma. "Oh my God," she whispered, pulling Emma into a hug. "I can't believe this." David followed suit, his embrace warm and welcoming. "Welcome home," he said simply, his voice choked with emotion. Michael, however, remained rooted to the spot, his expression unreadable. "This is a lot to take in," he said finally, his voice tight. "I need some time to process this." Noah nodded, understanding. "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need. Emma and I will be here." As the siblings began to absorb the news, Emma felt a mix of emotions. There was joy at finally meeting her birth family, but also anxiety about how they would all navigate this new dynamic. It was the beginning of a journey toward healing and connection, one that would require patience, understanding, and time. Over the following days, the family dynamics shifted in ways both subtle and profound. Laura took Emma under her wing, inviting her to join in family dinners and sharing stories of their childhood. "We were a different family before you were lost," she told Emma one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Dad was different too. More hopeful, I guess. We all changed after you disappeared." David, ever the free spirit, took Emma to his art studio, showing her his latest projects and introducing her to his creative friends. "You've got to come to my studio," he said one day, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I want to show you my latest project. It's a painting inspired by the idea of lost and found. A theme that seems pretty relevant now, huh?" Emma smiled, touched by his enthusiasm and willingness to include her in his world. Michael, however, struggled the most with the sudden change. As the eldest, he had shouldered a lot of responsibility over the years, and the revelation of Emma's existence challenged his understanding of his place in the family. "It's not fair," he said one night during a tense dinner. Why now? After all these years, why bring this up now? Noah looked at him, his heart heavy with understanding. It's not about fairness, Michael, he said gently. It's about family. And family is worth fighting for. Over time, Michael began to soften. He spent hours in his home office, reviewing the investigation files and the hospital records, trying to make sense of it all. One evening, he found Emma sitting alone in the garden, a book in her hand. "Can I join you?" he asked, his voice unsure. Emma nodded, scooting over on the bench to make room. They sat in silence for a while before Michael spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, "for being distant. It's just a lot to take in." Emma smiled gently. "I understand," she said. "It's a lot for all of us." Slowly, the family began to heal. The wounds of the past didn't disappear overnight, but they started to scab over, replaced by the tentative bonds of a newfound connection. Emma found herself growing closer to each of her siblings in different ways, each relationship unique and meaningful. And through it all, Noah was there, supporting them, guiding them, and slowly but surely rebuilding the family that had been torn apart so many years ago. As the weeks passed, Emma found herself becoming more comfortable in her new family. She learned to navigate the dynamics between her siblings, each relationship offering something different. With Laura, there was a bond of shared empathy and care. "We've missed you," Laura would often say, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. With David, it was a connection through creativity and a shared sense of adventure. They would spend hours discussing art and exploring the city together. Michael, however, was still finding his place in this new family structure. One afternoon, as Emma was practicing the piano in the music room, Michael joined her. "Mind if I play something?" he asked, his tone softer than usual. Emma shook her head, making room for him on the bench. They played a duet of a classical piece, their hands moving in sync across the keys. When the music faded, Michael turned to her. "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe we can start fresh. No more bitterness, just family." Emma smiled, touched by his words. "I'd like that," she said. And in that moment, a new chapter began for all of them. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions as the Sullivan family navigated this unexpected reunion. Emma moved into the guest house on the property, a small but cozy space that gave her the privacy she needed to process everything. Laura was a constant source of support, often stopping by with homemade meals and stories about their childhood. "We were a different family before you were lost," she told Emma one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Dad was different too. More hopeful, I guess. We all changed after you disappeared." David, ever the free spirit, took Emma under his wing, showing her around the city and introducing her to his artist friends. "You've got to come to my studio," he said one day, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I want to show you my latest project. It's a painting inspired by the idea of lost and found, a theme that seems pretty relevant now, huh?" Emma smiled, touched by his enthusiasm and willingness to include her in his world. Michael, however, struggled the most with the sudden change. As the eldest, he had shouldered a lot of responsibility over the years, and the revelation of Emma's existence challenged his understanding of his place in the family. "It's not fair," he said one night during a tense dinner. "Why now? After all these years, why bring this up now?" Noah looked at him, his heart heavy with understanding. "It's not about fairness, Michael," he said gently. "It's about family, and family is worth fighting for." Over time, Michael began to soften. He spent hours in his home office, reviewing the investigation files and the hospital records, trying to make sense of it all. One evening, he found Emma sitting alone in the garden, a book in her hand. "Can I join you?" he asked, his voice unsure. Emma nodded, scooting over on the bench. To make room, they sat in silence for a while before Michael spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, "for being distant. It's just a lot to take in." Emma smiled gently. "I understand," she said. "It's a lot for all of us." Slowly, the family began to heal. The wounds of the past didn't disappear overnight, but they started to scab over, replaced by the tentative bonds of a newfound connection. Emma found herself growing closer to each of her siblings in different ways, each relationship unique and meaningful. And through it all, Noah was there, supporting them, guiding them, and slowly but surely rebuilding the family that had been torn apart so many years ago. One weekend, the family organized a trip to the beach, a place that held fond memories for Michael, Laura, and David. For Emma, it was a new experience, one filled with laughter and the warmth of togetherness. As they built sandcastles and swam in the ocean, Emma felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. "This is what family is supposed to feel like," she said to Laura that evening as they watched the sunset. Laura took her hand. "It's never too late to find your place," she said, "and you're finally home." Noah watched from a distance, his heart full as he saw his children, his entire family, laughing and enjoying each other's company. It was a moment he had dreamed of but never truly believed would come. The pain of Sarah's loss had been a constant companion, but now it was slowly being replaced by hope and joy. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in decades he felt truly at peace. As the family gathered around the dining table that evening, sharing stories and laughter, Emma felt a warmth in her heart that she had never experienced before. This was her family, flawed, yes, but loving and supportive. And as she looked around the table at the faces of her new family, she knew that she had finally found her place in the world. Noah stood alone on the balcony of his study, the cool night air wrapping around him as he gazed at the stars. In his hand, he held the wallet that had started it all, the very item that had led him to Emma, his long-lost daughter Sarah. It was incredible to think that such a small object, lost in the chaos of a busy street, had been the catalyst for such a monumental change in his life. He reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the years of searching, the moments of despair, the unexpected encounter in Sunnyside. Fate, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of humor. Just when he had given up hope, when he had resigned himself to a life without Sarah, fate had stepped in, using the most ordinary of circumstances to bring about an extraordinary reunion. Noah thought about the ripple effect, a concept he had read about years ago in a self-help book. The idea that a single action could set off a chain of events that changed everything. The lost wallet was his ripple effect, the tiny pebble that had created waves large enough to reconnect a father with his daughter. It was a humbling reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could emerge in the most unexpected ways. As he prepared to go to bed, Noah made a silent promise to himself and to Emma. He would cherish every moment they had together, make up for lost time, and build a relationship that honored the bond they had lost and regained. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in decades, Noah felt a sense of peace. The void that had been in his heart since Sarah's disappearance was finally beginning to heal, filled with the love and hope that had been reignited by a single act of honesty and a lost wallet. Noah's reflections deepened as he considered the broader implications of his journey. He had always been a man who believed in control, in meticulously planning every aspect of his life and business. But this experience had taught him a valuable lesson. Some things were beyond human control, left to the whims of fate and the unpredictable nature of life. It was a humbling realization, one that filled him with both gratitude and humility. He also thought about the power of second chances. Emma had been given a second chance at family, and Noah had been given a second chance at fatherhood. It was an opportunity they both vowed not to squander. As he drifted off to sleep, Noah's final thoughts were of Emma, her laughter, her resilience, and the remarkable journey they had begun together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, In a long time, Noah faced it with hope and optimism. The following morning, Noah woke with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that building a relationship with Emma would take time and patience, but he was committed to the journey. As he prepared for the day, he received a text from Emma. "Coffee? My treat this time." Noah smiled as he typed his response. "I'd love to." And Emma, "Thank you." It was a small moment, but it symbolized the beginning of something beautiful. A family rediscovered, a bond reignited, and a future filled with promise. As we've witnessed the incredible journey of Noah and Emma, we're reminded of the profound impact that honesty, faith, and family can have on our lives. From a simple act of kindness, returning a lost wallet, to the breathtaking reunion of a father and daughter, this story has shown us that sometimes the universe has a way of balancing the scales in the most unexpected ways. We'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. What moment moved you the most? Did you expect this emotional reunion, or were you hoping for a different ending? Your reflections help us create content that resonates deeply with our community. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story, don't forget to like the video and share it with others who might appreciate the emotional journey. And be sure to follow our channel to never miss out on future stories that explore the beautiful complexities of family, fate, and human connection. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Noah and Emma. We're grateful to have you as part of our community, and we look forward to sharing more meaningful stories with you soon.